The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through Him, and without Him nothing came to be. What came to be through Him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. A man named John was sent from God. He came for testimony, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came to be through him. But the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, but his own people did not accept him. But to those who did accept him, he gave power to become children of God, to those who believed in his name, who were born not by natural generation, nor by human choice, nor by man's decision, but by God. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we saw his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, saying, "This was he whom I said, the one who is coming after me ranks ahead of me, because he existed before me." From his fullness we have all received the grace and the place of grace, because while the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. Only the Son, God, who is at the Father's side, has revealed him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Once again, I apologize for the voice, but I ask that you bear with me because I have a story that I feel like you need to hear. Damien Stanton was a parishioner of ours who unfortunately had a heart attack while cutting his grass on a tractor last summer. I don't mean for this to be depressing, because I'm sure that Damien is now an angel in heaven, because he gave me this story last year to use for Christmas. And I couldn't use the story because I already had a homily prepared. But I think it has even more meaning this Christmas, especially since it was given to me from Damien, who's with us in spirit today. It's called A Police Officer's Christmas Story. Some years ago, I had a special Christmas happening, which I'd like to share with you. It was on Christmas Eve, and a particularly cold Christmas Eve at that. I did not mind working the late shift on this day, since even criminals take off on Christmas Eve. I had allowed as many of my shift officers as possible to also take the day off. My conversation with the radio dispatcher at police headquarters was interrupted by a knock at the side door. I went to the door to greet an elderly man whose old Buick was parked in the police parking only spot. He explained that he was a bit strapped for cash. Despite the bitter cold, he stayed outside and kept glancing over at the old Buick. He stated that the government checks did not stretch to the end of this Christmas month, and asked for help securing a room at a local motel. He then quickly darted back to the Buick for an unknown reason. I stepped outside in time to see an elderly woman walking away from the Buick and up the driveway. The elderly man corralled the woman and brought her back to his Buick. I realized in a moment that that woman was Mary. Mary's relatives had filed a report with one of my officers indicating that Mary suffered from dementia and was possibly being exploited by an elderly alcoholic partner. The local social workers had not been able to track down the couple because they had been living in various motels and out of their car. I was touched by the care and gentleness the man exhibited when he placed Mary back into his car. Well, the only people who work the late shift on Christmas Eve are police, hospital staff, and clergy. I knew I could not rely upon social services to quickly respond to the man's request. I'd worked extra hours that season, so I had a few extra bucks to spare. What better time to practice charity than on Christmas Eve? So I decided to help out the couple. With the knowledge that the man was suspected of being an alcoholic, I didn't want to give him cash directly. I asked him to follow me to the local Motel 6. As I drove to the motel, I pondered how a presumed alcoholic became the primary caretaker for this elderly woman with dementia. I arrived at the hotel ahead of the gentleman and went into the motel's office to explain the situation. The clerk agreed the situation was sad and stated the couple could have an extra day of lodging since it was now past midnight. By this time, the old Buick was parked outside the motel office. The elderly man was stepping inside. He thanked me abundantly as he continued to look over his shoulder at the Buick. I wished him a Merry Christmas and was about to leave the office when the clerk asked for his name at the register. The man replied, "Joseph." I stopped in my tracks in utter amazement at the coincidence. I wondered if just over 2,000 years ago, a different Joseph and Mary had asked a Roman centurion for assistance. I stepped outside into the bitter cold and paused to look up into the heavens. The stars shone with a brilliance I'd never seen. I knew I'd just received the best gift I was going to receive that Christmas. I recalled that before we were called police officers, we were known as peace officers. Peace be with you and yours this Christmas. I'm sure that Damien intended that to be heard by all of us today. I've been reading a book over Advent called Joy to the World by Scott Hahn. And it talks about the Christmas story from the different perspectives of the shepherds, the wise men, and the angels. The latest chapter talks about how there are still angels all around us. It even states that the star that the wise men followed was the only star that went from north to south instead of east to west. So they wonder if instead of a star, that might have been an angel guiding them on their way. Last night was pretty cloudy, but the nights before that, I don't know if you noticed the big bright star to the right of the moon every night. Perhaps that's an angel still watching over us. So this Christmas, remember, Mary, Jesus, and Joseph are still with us. And try to take notice of all of the angels that are still around you.